We are Group 4, and we're covering Irish Home Rule. And we just want to thank you guys for coming to class, and let's begin.
The Unionists expressed their opposition to Home Rule by writing letters, declarations by both men and women, making flyers, postcards, and posters to inform other Irish citizens of their movement, and creating parties that pledged their opposition, such as Ulster's Solemn League, and getting volunteers to help them with their movement. They gave speeches and attempted to get English and Scottish men to join their side. In Lord Dunleith's letter to Sir Edward Carson on March 9, 1915, he stated that, "We can certainly claim that we have succeeded in turning the attention of Englishmen and Scottishmen towards Ulster and its inhabitants." They used many different forms to express their feelings towards the Home Rule and would stop at nothing to achieve their goal.
The Unionists were willing to take great measures in order to defend their position against Home Rule. A Unionist group called the Ulster's Solemn League stated on Ulster Day in September 1912 that they would use all means which may be found necessary to defeat the present conspiracy to set up a Home Rule Parliament in Ireland. The Unionists even went as far as to raise a military force called the Ulster Volunteer Force, which became armed and trained for a possible altercation. Although the volunteer force was willing to do whatever was necessary to oppose Home Rule, they did not wish to enter an armed conflict with the Crown. Rather, they hoped the presence of a military force would be enough to prevent Home Rule.
On paper, Home Rule was a way for the Irish people to govern themselves while still being a part of the Crown. For Unionists, however, Home Rule presented a threat that was far more severe. The Unionists interpreted Home Rule as a nationalist method of reversing the 17th century plantations. They believed the act would suppress the Protestant religion, reduce Unionist status in society, and even put Unionist lives in jeopardy should the law be passed. Because of the perceived impact it would have on the identity, values, and existence of the Protestants in Ireland, Home Rule was vehemently opposed. The first two Home Rule Acts were not a real threat because there was so much disunity within the Liberal Party, and the House of Lords could easily vote to veto the bills. However, the passing of the Parliament Act in 1911 limited the House of Lords' veto power and presented a very real possibility of Home Rule being passed. The reality of Home Rule is what mobilized the Unionist forces in the early 20th century. It was a reaction, and while they were still loyal to the Crown, the impending violence can be interpreted as an act of self-preservation. The Unionists weren't fighting the Crown. They were opposing the laws that threatened their way of life.
The Unionist expression of opposition to Home Rule is in large part responsible for the reintroduction of the gun into Irish politics. The Unionists clearly stated in Ulster's Solemn League and Covenant of September 28, 1912, that they are willing to oppose Home Rule by any means necessary, including raising arms. The women of Ulster's voice their support for the policies of the men of Ulster in the Ulster's Women's Declaration of September 28, 1912. These words were put into action in January of 1913 when the Unionists formed the Unionist Volunteer League, a military of sorts to defend the position of the Unionists. With the formation of this armed force, the Unionists were binding their political views with the military. It was their political party's policy to use guns and force to support their cause. In response to Ulster Volunteer League, the Irish Nationalists, who supported Home Rule, also created an army. Now we see that both parties in Ireland have guns behind them. The Unionists did not necessarily want to use violence as a standard practice for their political party. In fact, in Lord Dunleith's letter to Sir Edward Carson, he specifically says that he does not wish any UVL troops to engage in battle, as they would probably not win against the King's army. The Unionists just wanted to make it clear that their opposition to Home Rule was very strong. Therefore, even though the armies were raised more as a threat than a promise of violence, the gun was still an integral part of the Unionist and Irish nationalist parties. Thanks for watching. Bye.